28, 2011. So it simply means that 11 years ago, or 10 years ago, that was when we have been using this particular law that has been tabled before every Nigerian. I'm still going to share my slide. I said, let me just give details. Now, 3 organizations have been credited with the passage of this act. So I'm going to mention these 3 organizations. Now, the first organization is MRA. MRA is Media Rights Agenda. And I think MRA is headed by Mr. Edetu Joe. Yes, and it's, I think their office is in Lagos. I think in Yaba area, I guess. Now, the other organization is the organization that likes to sue the federal government, which is SERAP. SERAP, and the last one, I don't think they still exist, which is CLO. Now, CLO is Civil Liberty Organization. So, and the CLO is kind of an organization that gave birth to so many great activists that we have on ground, all successful donor executive directors that we have in this country right now. So one of them that we have is Mr. Dayo Olaide, Larry Raj, even the late Innocent also worked clearly. We had Dr. Otive, who is also managing what's it called, Tireless. So you have a number of them that are doing well now. So those were the 3 organizations that have been credited to the passage of the FOI Act, because they pushed, campaign, met with different legislators until that bill was passed and was signed into law. That was May 28, 2011, and 10 years after the bill or after the act, how well are Nigerians using this act in order for them to demand for information. So that would be the introduction. So let me share my slide now. Okay, I believe you can see my slide. So,
hello.
Now, hello?
Hello, my my video was muted. It has stopped. I couldn't see anything. Can only hear voices.
So can everyone see my screen?
I can see your screen, Tolu, clearly.
Okay.
Can I see clearly?
Okay, so that's fine. Now the FOI. So there's something called right to information, and it is one of the rights that we have. So there's there's child rights, there's rights to life. So different rights. But then there's also rights to information. So it simply means that the federal government should be able to provide access to information to all the citizens of all the Nigerian citizens. Yeah. And there are also international declaration that supports freedom of expression, that also supports the rights to or access to information. And so, for example, you have the International NGO Article 19, which is for the Global Campaign for Free Expression. You have, I think I have some of them listed there. Yeah, so you have the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, opinion and expression. Um, and it also says that you have this right also includes freedom to hold opinions without interference. And you can use that same freedom to seek, receive, and impact information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So there's still the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Article 9, that also says that every individual shall have the right to receive information. Every individual shall also have the right to express opinion within the law. So you have the African Commission on Human Rights, you have different declarations like that that supports access to information. And since you have all this backing, how well you use this information will also determine how informed you and I will be. And we all know that knowledge is power. So, and how you use this power will also go a long way in order to shape we're able to shape the level of accountability because we have the right to hold the government accountable. But then the major thing is you can only hold them to account based on the information that you have. So, and if you can use the FOI very well, it simply means that you can have access to information that seems not to be out there in the public space. So there's something called proactive disclosure. So it simply means that the government needs to also disclose information even without activating the FOI. So let's start with the budget. The budget is meant to be in the public space. The procurement details of every contractor should be there through open contracting. So you should have all that information. So the bill of quantity, so that the what's it called now? The community that a project will be cited, the community members can easily have that information and ensure that the contractor supplies all the materials based on the bill of quantity. So if you say it's in the bill of quantity that it's going to use a 9-inch block, and at the end of the day, it's using a 6-inch. So you as a community member can tell him to say, no, based on the bill of quantity that we have here, we have all the details. You're not doing the right thing. But in as much you alter that information, citizens will not be able to ensure that the funds are utilized very well. So that's just the one part. I'm still going to go to the questions that were shared with me. I'm just trying to explain the FOI, the questions or some of the requests we can make as a citizen. So I think I mentioned this about individual will be able to enjoy the right to information when they are free to access relevant information. So as such access to information is the practical implementation of the right to information. So the FOI also has different provisions capable of transforming the culture of secrecy in Nigeria. If you talk to an average, especially for those ones that have been in the civil servant for a very long time, once they see an FOI request, they tend not to understand it. Now, it simply means that the government on its own is not doing, probably is not doing enough in terms of training the citizens or the civil servants on the FOI. So they need to be that awareness. And they respect the oath of secrecy more than the freedom of information, no matter how well you train them. I know there are different organizations that do lots of training. MRA, which I mentioned earlier, that's Media Rights Agenda, PPDC. There's this organization called is it Right to Know? R2K, yes. R2K, which is Right to Know, at least, and many more that do trainings. they do train civil servants on the FY so that by the time they see a request from organizations, they just have to do the needful. Now, also in the FY, probably go into details about the FY Acts because there are some things that have been mandated by the MDAs when it comes to ensuring compliance. For example, the MDA must have a desk officer, an FOI desk officer who receives FOI requests. And these information are meant to be stored. And within 7 days, the request should be granted. And in case you will not be providing answers to that request, you have to write them to seek for additional days. Now, it simply means that if it's going to take the organization or the MDA 21 days to provide answers to the request, they need to write the organization that is requesting for that information within 7 days to say, oh, we seek additional 14 days to be able to respond to you. Now, it is not just for them to assume that, oh, we don't have this information. You have to reply back. With that response, it simply means that the government knows much about the FY. Now, because non-responsibly means that you have the right as a citizen to sue the government for non-compliance of the FOI because it's the breach of the law, and then you can, materials are willing to sue the MDAs for non-compliance. So these are the salient provisions. Now, the rights of access to records, we have essential records, we have response to access requests, penalties for destruction of records, exemption of classified information from disclosure. Number 6 is the submission of annual reports to the Attorney General, and training of government officials. So I might not be able to go through this 7 salient provisions, but then I'll just try and touch 1 or 2. So for the right of access to records, now the FOI Act provides that notwithstanding anything contained in any other act. So it simply means that the FOI that has been in existence before the FOI Act was passed into law, that the right of any person to access or request information, whether or not contained in any written form, which is the custody or possession of any public official or agency, or describe, or howsoever described is established. Now, it simply means that, like I said earlier, this FOI Act overrides every other act or law that has been in existence. So when it means that, no, the FOI Act overrides that, and whatever you make a request, it should be granted. Now you have essential records. So this is so long. So you have lists of these essential records that you can ask for. So you have list of files containing application for any contracts. You can even ask for salaries. You can ask for the what's it called now? The organogram of the MDA. You can ask for the number of workers they have. We've done that last year. We've asked for the salary structure, and they forward some to keep it because they were saying that they are due to data privacy, but then we did not ask for the names. We only want the total number of the workers that you have. Then we want to also see the salary structure. So by the time your recurrent budget is out, we want to be able to say, oh, based on this amount and based on the salary structure, this is what to expect from MDA X. So not come 2022, if, for example, now, if MDAX is saying in 2021, the current expenditure is at, let's say, 10 naira, and come 20, maybe 14 naira. So that is question why there was an increase from 10 to 40. Was there recruitment? Did you guys recruit? And so questions like that should be answered based on the increase of the recurring budget or recurring expenditure of the organization. And that was why we had to ask that question. So you have the list there that you can ask for you to get response. So I mentioned this earlier when it comes to response to access requests. So you have 7 days. So they can also deny your application also, but then they must give you reasons for denial. So they should be able to explain why they are not going to give you what you can rewrite and ask for more information based on that. So if you're reading my slide, you see that maybe line 3 or line 4, that within 7 days, they're meant to give you response. And if you don't, you can also do an additional 7 days, which is here, additional 7 days. However, some information might require even 30 days. Some information can require maybe 6 months before you can get feedback from the government. So request or reply your letter seeking for additional days. That must be stated. So we've had situations of some falsifying records because they don't have that information. They would want to just put the wrong information out there or give you wrong information. And that's why anytime we do FOI requests, we try to put the request on social media, and we also put the response on social media. So, and by the time we use that information, we also give source so that they will know that it was based on the response that we got when we were using. So, so as to stay clear of litigation. So penalties for that, there's 500,000 naira fine by the institution or the public officer who wrongly denies access to information or records. Like I said earlier, and Nigerians willing to take up that litigation part when it comes to ensuring that the FOI is the compliance level is high. So these are the exemptions of classified information from disclosure. So you have, so let me just read this. So the FOI Act exempts certain information and records from public access. This includes any information disclosure which may be injurious to the conduct of international affairs and the defense of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So there was a time we wrote we wrote the Ministry of Defense, we wrote the Army, the Navy, we wrote the Air Force. Yeah, so we were asking for details of their capital project, but at the end of the day, they denied that request. So we did submit this letter in person. So we sent a courier, a dispatch rider to drop it. And I think they've acknowledged the letter, but as he was stepping out, they now asked him that he should reach out to the organization that sent him to come and deliver the letter themselves. Which was really funny because one, you've acknowledged the letter, but at the end of the day, you now had to seize the letter, requesting that we should come in person. That's one. I think it was the DSS that came to our office. So there's this consultant called the FOI ranking. Every year we do that. We begin, I think we started in 2022 or 2021 already. So where we write 250 NDAs. So the people in the consortium, MRA, SERAP, budget, right to know. We have Basic Rights Watch. So we have, I think, 7 organizations that are members of this consortium. And what we try to do is to rank 250 MDAs in terms of compliance to the FOI request. And so they requested, so the DGSS came to budget office, went to PPDC's office. That was last year. Went to I think one other organization. Yeah, ICIR, those 3 organizations. So they came to our offices and they were asking more like intimidation, asking unnecessary questions. Your board members, are you guys registered? We need your CAC, whatever. We need your annual reports, questions that are not even, that does not relate to you giving us feedback based on the questions made. So which was quite so we had to deny them. So they came in person to seek this information, right? So we told them to also write us officially the same way we wrote them to seek for this information. Then we would then know who is asking this question, because the name of the person who is writing the letter would have to be on that particular letter, right? So we wanted to know who is going to be requesting this information to know how to respond, but they never did. So they went and they didn't write. So because we said we did not come to your office to verbally request for this information, we wrote a letter, so you should also do the same. So that was the response we gave them. So every year, so there should also be a submission, because it states there in the FOI Act that all public institutions should submit to the Office of the Attorney General a report containing details of requests received and matters arising on or before February 1st each year. So it simply means that of 2020 should have been submitted before or on February 1st of 2021. And so it simply means that that should be published on the Ministry of Justice website. So if you go to the Ministry of Justice website, you should be able to get information on the what's it called now? A report on the number of requests received or denied by different MDAs. But the truth is, lots of MDAs don't submit this report and there are no consequences. So the federal government is business as usual, where they don't listen to one another. So I mentioned training of government officials. So government themselves are meant to train officers, but then because government will tell you they don't have funds to do the training, organizations that I mentioned earlier, PPDC, MRA, right, do lots of trainings. They do train civil servants on this particular act in order for them to be able to effectively implement this act. So there are lots of obstacles. I'm still going to go into that, but I think there were questions from, I think I have questions from the, what's it called now? From Seed Africa. And I just want to go through some of them. So, so he said I should explain the FOI Act, which I've done. He said I should talk about its effectiveness as a tool in tackling corruption. So, so just to buttress my point on the effectiveness of this tool, citizens as a whole, or Nigerian citizens, should be able to understand that information is power, but then how powerful you can be also is directly proportional to how well you use that power. And so the FOI is there, and it simply means that you can use it to demand for information at the federal level, and it's on selected states now. Because I said, note, hello.
Sorry to cut you,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to go around the same set of questions again.
Okay.
Maybe I should reframe that question to effectively capture the minds of other people.
Okay.
So, as you started, yes, we want to look at the effectiveness of this tool with specific reference to tackling corruption. Because, you know, it's one thing for people to want to request information for the purpose of having that information.
Mm-hmm.
However, when the issue of corruption comes in, the giver of that information is likely going to streamline the response so as to cover what you are looking for. I mean, with respect to corruption. So how effective is this tool in addressing the issue of corruption? Let your response flow in that light. Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with so if there's a corruption case, for example, it simply means whether you use your FOI request or not, you will not get response because it's part of those things that you cannot have access to in terms of ongoing cases. However, let's say there's an issue of embezzlement and you want to know much about it. So you can easily use the FOI to demand for more information right in the MDA, but then you should have little knowledge about that issue that you want to get clarity on. So let's start with the JAMB. So I did an FOI request to, I think, yeah, to ICPC. That was before, I think that was early this year. Yes, that was early this year. And so the formal JAMB registrar, which is, what's his name again? It's not Jerry. Is it Deepo or something? I wrote him. Let me just quickly check. Sorry, please.
I think it should be Dibu or Jerry.
Okay. So yeah, Dibu. So it's Dibu or Jerry Day. So I wrote ICPC, and I also wrote about it. And I got a response from ICPC. Now the case has been ongoing for like 4 years, but then we did not hear. So I had to Google to be able to see if the case was still in court. But then there was no latest news about the Dibu's case or Professor Dibu Ojerede's case. And by the time we did an FOI, ICPC responded and said the case is still ongoing. And believe you me, I think 5 days after, that was when they now charged him to court again. I was like, wow. So it seems that these guys are waiting for people to still talk about it, because every JAMB, I say every JAMB case, no, every court case or corruption cases, you can find them on ICPC's website. But the last case on Professor Dibu's embezzlement. So I was like, no, if we keep quiet, then we will not get any relevant information about this. And that was why I had to mention it. So use the FOI for tackling corruption. So let me do a case study. You go to a particular community. And that's been budgeted for that particular community that a borehole would be sunk. And the next thing is the contractor goes on site. Maybe the project was abandoned to maybe the 50% stage. So simply means that citizens don't have access to water, but then a certain amount has been paid to that contractor. So you can use the FOI to write the implementing agency that is meant to, that is responsible for the facilitation of that particular project. Also, you can write the legislator representing that community in their constituency. So
Okay,
the FOI.
I was going to interrupt you at that point. Yes, hello, because you're already getting into the second question that I have here. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I said you're already getting into the second question that I was going to ask you, which is how can we use FOI, especially the people at the grassroots? Because you see, this tool has been seen or is perceived to be the tool for the elites, for the Abuja, for the Lagos, for the Port Harcourt, the highbrow states. This tool is seen as the elite tool. How can the people at the grassroots use this tool to combat corruption? What the instance you gave now about sinking a borehole, leaving it 50% completed, we are aware of some drainages being abandoned halfway. We are aware of some road maintenances done and left halfway. So how can the people at that level use this FOI Act with their own knowledge in tackling corruption?
So to answer your question, I think I mentioned earlier that even the civil servants are not even well informed about this act. However, I think that also goes in the same direction with the people at the grassroots. So organizations like yours, mine, that go into this quote unquote these forgotten places, because whether you like it or not, there was a time I was with Tracker. I just wanted to cite this example because some projects are cited, it takes I think there was a time I went to Edo State, and from the local government to that particular community, I think I spent 4 hours motoring at all. And so, and there's a project for that community, and you begin to wonder, is it that they intentionally are to put this project here just so that people will not be able to, or people will be discouraged when it comes to M&E or tracking this project, that 4 hours on a bike, I can't do that, so let me just turn back, But at the end of the day, you discover that some of these projects are not done because those people are not even informed about the budget to start with, talk less of the FOI Act. And so when budget or tracker goes to or visits communities to track projects, so we do town hall meetings, right? Now, this town hall meetings is about sensitization on the need to follow the budget, on the need to know the budget, whether it is a local government budget, whether it's a state budget, whether it's a federal budget. But the federal budget on its own will not be implemented only in Abuja, right? Across the 36 states, that's where this project will be implemented. So it simply means that there's a higher chance that your community will be captured in the budget in any of these three: state, local government, or federal. And so you teach them on the need for them to have access to the budget. You give them relevant websites where they can download the budget, on budget websites, on the openstate.ng website, where you have all the state budgets there. If you go to openstate.ng, you find the 36 state budget there. For the local government, if you go to Open Kaduna, you see the Kaduna local government budget. If you go to, I think, Edo State's website, you get the local government budget. But for, I think those two states are still the ones, and those two states have been consistent when it comes to having local government budget there. And so you tell them about the budget. And the next thing is that projects that is meant for that community, that you talk about it in general. So the next thing is, after the sensitization, is for them to now train them, for you to train them on the FY Act. And then you now give them a template of an FY request. Now the community will be themselves now, quote and unquote, themselves will be the one to write the request using the community letter and paper to write the implementing agencies. So if it's whether it is whether it's a constituency project or not, it is important for you to write your legislator, your representative, because he is representing you at the federal level. So it's easier for him to be able to call MDA, ABC and say, oh, a project in a community was done halfway. Can you ensure that this particular project is completed? So he has a stronger say when it comes to facilitating projects for his community. So if it's a constituency project, that makes it easy also. You write him seeking for more information. So you don't have to say, oh, he has a bezel, blah, blah, blah. No. A polite request will also guarantee a polite response. So once you ask questions that relate to the project, saying that, oh, can you provide more information about this project, blah, 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 that has been done halfway, he should be able to give you information around that. And it is his job as a legislator to ensure that once a community writes him, he should be able to provide a response. Now, community budgets or any other CSOs can submit the letter on behalf of this community, right? But then an acknowledged copy should also be sent to the community as a record that we've written this particular person, just in case he wants to run for an office again. So you can, so by the time he's doing his campaigning, promising you heaven and earth, you can now make reference to the day you guys wrote it, that based on this request, he's yet to comply. So you probably may decide on what to do with your vote. So that's
Tolu, please, I don't know. I think a question just popped up in my head when you said any CSO can submit the request on behalf of the community. So I was going to ask, is it that communities can't submit an FOI request themselves?
So it depends on the community. So let's say, for example, now, you decide to go to a community in Kogi State. So there's this town called Igalamela. I don't think you've been there. And is is even out of town, very far from Lokoja. And then most of the people living in that community, maybe not almost, except maybe for the community head, have visited Abuja or has visited Abuja. And they will tell you that it's going to cost them a whole lot of money for them to leave their village and now come to Abuja to submit a letter, right? So they can't even use a dispatch rider because maybe dispatch rider cannot even go to such communities. So the best thing is since you're the one going to sensitize that community and you're still going back again, right, to your own place of residence, or because you have access to these funds through donor funding, right? You can submit the letter. You also need to give them that acknowledged copy. That acknowledged copy of their letter should be given to them so that they can have it in their records.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me flow in that light and also relate it to my next question. So take, for example, this same community that you mentioned in Kogi State. It's hard to believe that such a community would not have one of their members or their children or someone representing them in the town. So, and my next question will now be that what is the role of ICT in the use of FOI Act to tackle corruption? So, like you said, dispatch rider will not be able to go into that community, but how can they leverage? And then it's assumed that yes, MTN, Airtel, Glo, or one of them would have sunk their network poles in this community, which gives them access to the internet and the likes. How can they make use of this while saving cost also? How can they make use of the ICT enablement to be able to do this, even if they're not sending the letter to the respective MDA? Is it possible that they send it electronically to someone on ground in Abuja and then who onwardly submit physically these complaints or this request and all of that?
Yeah, so let me answer this question very well. Now, how I wish you've been to these extreme communities so you will know that poverty is real, and whether the internet penetration has not captured some of these people. So none of them might be using an internet-enabled phone. They're still using the normal Nokia phones that we do use. Now, having a representative or a member in the state capital, what if the person is not willing to go through the stress, right? What if the person is not even ready to hold the government accountable? And please just note something. For every community you visit, I don't want to use what is a likelihood. Yeah? There is an 100% chance. Yeah, there's this 100% chance that the village head belongs to a political party, and you have the community members that are also a card carrying member of different political parties. So by the time you want to do a town hall meeting, you just have to come in as a non-partisan person so that you can bring these 2 or just 3 or whatever political party they belong to, for them to be able to see the need that, no, this is about our community and not the political party. So at the end of the day, maybe the person you want to send on an errand in the state capital belongs to the what's it called? To an opposition. You might not even be able to send ruling party. The person might not still be willing to do that, especially if you don't get the buy-in of the village head. Then you can't even write. Okay, so there are some instances whereby you visit the community, you do this sensitization. At the end of the day, you tell them to write FOI, and they will tell you there's no point. Most of them will be scared. At the end of the day, budgets will have to write of that community, that will be the one to then do the advocacy on behalf of the community to ensure that that project is implemented. So there are cases like that. So whether they have a family member in the state capital does not count. Some of them don't even have that resources to be able to say, oh, let's send this letter. So when it comes to ICT now, education is really, really key. And most of them, I wish you do go to rural areas. So forget about the state capital. By the time you visit some communities, then you begin to wonder that, how can a school of this nature how do you expect? And they will say these children are leaders of tomorrow, right? And you begin to wonder, with this school, what kind of teachers would they have? What kind of what's the type of the level of quality of education that these people? Yeah.
Okay, I was just thinking, yeah, because I quite agree with you that some communities, like you give an example of that community in Kogi State, might not have access to internet and probably lights, and the rest, but from this work also, we've been to some communities, though very rural, and they still have access to the internet in their own little way.
Which part? Which community?
I've been to different
please
communities.
Don't tell me Lagos, so please.
No, not Lagos. Even Southwest, the East,
Okay.
The North, and they still have access to the internet. No matter how it might not be the 4G that we have in Lagos. So, but we are now, I think that question is trying to look at how to be able to make use of that opportunity and to probably reduce cost. Buki, trying to say something?
Yes, sorry to cut you. I understand where you're coming from, and that is also in line with my thoughts. We sit in the comfort of our houses and we hear stories from the core north, from all these rural communities that they've never experienced clean water. I saw one about 3 or 4 days ago that have never had a chance at clean water. So how did this information get to social media? So this is what I'm talking about. It is what we want to come out that comes out, except we don't want to push it out. That's the truth of the matter. The digital world has exploded to even the core of the rural areas. It is how it is being pushed out, one channel to the other. So except we are not deliberate about pushing the information out. If we are deliberate and we really, really require a change, this information would come out as much as we want them to come out.
So Buki, let me just understand one thing. Is it for the organization or for the community members at the grassroots that should make use of this ICT?
Flowing from my last question,
a
lot of these communities do not know how to push their requests, do not even know how to make the requests. And as you said, a couple of NGOs go into these communities, and don't forget, these NGOs have projects that are time-bound. 2-year project, 3-year project, and at the end of the project, they leave the community, except they get funded again to proceed. So what happens when they've engaged them for 2 years and they pull up? How do they sustain the momentum, especially in pushing their issues out? And how do they do this using technology, especially when the organization is no longer on ground to provide that support?
So, Buki, I can answer your question, but I'm only telling you the challenges because I've been to the field several times. So I was the lead of the tracker department, at least for 4 years, and that involves traveling to almost 30 states in the country. And I've been to these rural areas and I know the issues. So I'm telling you, no matter how much you try, some don't even have email addresses. Some cannot even use Twitter. Despite their representatives being on Twitter, they don't even have the Twitter app. They don't know how to use it. Even the elite amongst us don't even know how to use Twitter, right? So we have all these platforms that they can use, but then they do not know how to use them. But the major thing is, maybe it's because of the level of education. That was why I had to bring in the school, the level of education, or the quality of education that they have gone through. And that has also been as added to the challenges that they are facing. However, if the simple thing, which is the offline way of engaging the representatives of the government, is through letter writing or FOI, that goes a long way. Now, the next thing is that CSO or that organization should now take it up to advocate on social media on behalf of the community to ensure that that project is done. Except you go to maybe the state capital where you know that you have the elite, where you have the educated ones, then you can begin to tell them, oh, Do you know your representative is on social media, is on Twitter? Can you engage him on Twitter? But therefore, those are the grassroots. Bringing in ICT or social media for them to run it as a campaign will be difficult, except you are going to take your time to be able to train them. But if you do not have the resources, offline engagement is the best way to go. While the online and the offline engagement also falls on the responsibility or falls on the organization that is doing the sensitization. And with that, you can able to get reasonable answers from the MDAs.
That response. Our time is fast spent, and I still have one or two questions to ask you. But a quick one: is it possible that we get the FY request templates? Is it possible that you share with us for the sake of the participants here?
So I can. So there's no one way to make a request, but then it's not cast in stone. You can write, but then I can share samples with you.
Okay, that would be fine. And then my question, I think second to the last or the last question has to do with yes, I know in the course of your presentation you mentioned a few obstacles, and even this last discussion you mentioned a few obstacles, but can you, in bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4, can you let us know the possible obstacles into using FY and how are these obstacles surmounted in bullets, please?
Okay, so let's see. So the obstacles. I mentioned that's one. I think I spoke much. I explained more of the oath of secrecy that we have that most of these civil servants still respect or obey more than the FOI. So the level of awareness also about the FOI Act is a major obstacle. And CSOs like ours, like yours, needs to do more in ensuring that both civil servants and the citizens are well informed about this. Record keeping. So ICT is really key here when it comes to record keeping. But then you still discover that most of these MTAs, they have not really embraced technology. So they still do papers, and then you go to their file room or their record office, and then you see lots of files from 80s and the like. And here's technology, and you can put all this information out there that can stay for 1 million years. Nothing will happen to it. But then they still prefer taking papers around. So while some have embraced it, yet some are still using the paper form of record keeping. So, and that's where you see that they tell you a particular office got burnt, and they'll tell you the exact office that got burnt. Because when you seek for information, is the particular office where you need that information. So you have non-domestication of the FY. So I was stating our main emphasis on federal government, because some states have yet to domesticate the FY. And so you can write the federal government. So Ekiti, for example, has domesticated the FY Act. Enugu State has done that. Few states, Kaduna and the likes, maybe let's say out of the 36 states, I think 8 of them have done that. However, you still have other states that are yet to domesticate it. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, did you say something? I think you interrupted.
I guess our network is breaking.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so I take from your last comment, I take one of the obstacles to be the level of awareness. I also take the discussion of we're still in the analog age and having to deal with papers and all of that. And then I take another obstacle to me, the non-domestication of the laws, the Violence Against Persons Act, the Child Rights Act, and all of that. So I don't understand this tripartite law application, but it's one step at a time anyway. And then the contradiction between how we make some laws when we know that we have actually another one that I don't understand why we do that in this part of the world, but well, we're evolving and would get out of it, hopefully. And well, I think that would be my, okay, I have one more question, please. Can the FOI Act be used to request information from private organizations or private firms, or is it strictly for public organizations?
FOI can only be used for, so it can only be used to get information from federal government. However, you can use the FOI on organizations, private organizations that are getting funds, that are spending, let me use public funds. So for example, a contractor gets, a contract is awarded to a particular contractor, you can write the contractor to use an FOI, right? So,
okay.
So that is, so, but you can't write a UBA, for example, using FOI Act or any bank, no.
Oh, okay. So any firm that's utilizing the federal government
public funds, yeah. So you can use the FOI Act based on that particular, because there must be a need for for requesting that information. So you should also state it in that letter.
Okay, so briefly, I'd like to get feedback or questions, clarifications, comments from our participants. Thank you for holding on. It's been over an hour that we've been together. Please, let's have your questions by show of hands, by dropping your questions in the comments, or by unmuting yourself to ask your questions. The floor is yours, participants. Please, let's have your questions. Thank you. Questions, comments from anyone before we call it a day?
I guess you or Leko can ask the question.
Yeah, yes, I have a question. Probably this would help someone else to be able to ask their question. While you were talking about non-domestication of the FOI Act, and you stated that only about 8 states had domesticated the FOI Act. I know this same issue is similar to that of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and some other acts out there. I want to ask, what role, this might not be for individuals, but maybe as an organization, what role can we play to push other states, or probably to encourage other states to be able to domesticate this FOI Act in their states?
Okay, so I think that speaks to the question on open governance. So let's start with the OGP. So the OGP asks for thematic areas. So you have fiscal transparency. The fiscal transparency speaks about budget, procurement, and the likes. You have access to information, which is the second one now. Now, access to information covers this particular discussion that we're talking about. We have citizens engagement. The fourth one, I think, is inclusiveness or something. Inclusiveness, yeah. So now, for any state to sign or to embrace or to sign up to the OGP, it simply means that they should have that level of disclosure in the state. And that speaks to, and the only way you can prove as a state is to show that you have domesticated the FOI Act in your state. And so we can start pushing for states to sign up to OGP. Once they sign up to OGP, every other thing will fall into place. And so few states are OGP compliant now. However, you might sign up to OGP, but there's still other things involved, like you should have an action plan where you have all the issues that you want to tackle. But the OGP is more like a co-creation between the citizen and the government. So where you are co-creating and providing solutions on how to tackle different issues facing the state. And if access to information is also part of it, then you also need to bring in that, there should be a level of disclosure by the time the state wants to start implementing the OGP. And so you can bring in that into play to say, to sign up onto OGP, let's have the freedom of information. Even as a state, by the time they sign a letter of intent to the OGP Secretariat here in Abuja, what they need to do, what the OGP Secretariat will ask is, they will ask questions around how open is your budget, how accessible are your information, and they'll tell you for you to bring proof, and the proof will now be all this that I mentioned. So then if they don't have that information, you have to deny the application, then tell them you need to have the freedom of information domesticated. You need to have your budget published every year, not just your budget, your what's it called now? Budget implementation reports, your audit reports, and the like. So that's one way to go about it.
All right. Okay. Buki.
Do we have more questions? I'm trying to look through the chat box now. If we have any question dropped there, I can't see anyone. So
Submitted himself.
okay, there's a hand. Samuel Odusoya he has his hand up. Please, you have the floor. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
I would
Thank
like
you.
to ask a question.
Go ahead, Samuel. We can hear you.
Okay, good morning. All right, thank you very much, Kola. Mr. Tolu Tokwe, I appreciate the information that you just given to us. I joined the call rather late, so I just need some clarifications. I believe I've spoken about some of these points, but just for me to be sure. In the course of the conversation, it appears that submitting an FOI seems to be done either by in group, like a community or a corporate organization or something. Also, I want to know if an like you talking about a community in Kogi State, and let's consider that there could be maybe a member of the community who is really interested in the development of the community and want to know what to do. If the community is being partisan, maybe the community leader don't want to require submitting an FY. Okay, can that individual go about it, and or does he have to go through maybe a CSO or go through an organization? That's one. Another thing is, and in submitting an FY, it appears as though from what I pick from the session, that when you're writing, you need to actually make it that you're writing on the back end or the background, FOI, because a layman, just what I would like to maybe my constituency or to someone, question for them to give me information about it. So certainly, I'm just looking at it in this way. I have to indicate that I'm writing on the back end, and then I would therefore act rather, and then I believe that would seriousness and attention that I would require. That's that. Another is the channel. We talk about ICT as well as writing in person or submitting in person. And I'm just complete. Which will be more effective? Is it actually submitting a request in person, or actually making the request by mail, by any other means? I understand that you need to get you know, you need to get an acknowledgement to whatever letter you're submitting. But can't it be done by mail if I can't travel all the way to Abuja or to the place and then still be able to follow up and get the acknowledgement? Thank you.
Okay, so I got the first and the last question, but the second one, probably if you can type it in the chat box so I can respond to that. So let me answer the first one, which has to do with an individual writing an FOI request. Yes, an individual can do that. However, so there's this question I normally ask: who is a true Nigerian? How do you differentiate who is from Niger Republic and who is from, let's say, somewhere in Akure? Do you get? So now, for you to be able to differentiate that, it simply means that you're asking questions, yes, but then you also need to explain or give details about who you are. You don't have to put your home address just for security reasons. You have to exclude that information. However, you can provide relevant information about you being a taxpayer, so you are not a tax evader. So you put your tax identification number, for example, and it says, oh, because you pay your tax, which is one of the reasons why I tell people that we don't ask questions because maybe we don't pay our taxes enough. And you say, maybe once I get my salary, yes, that is deducted from source, which is the payee, right? However, if you can provide information, so that in case they want to even know much about you, your team speaks a lot to say, oh, because I pay my taxes, put that thing there. And then you can now ask your questions based on the way you see it. For example, you can even ask questions about the road in your community to say, oh, this road has been here, or this road has been in a bad shape for the last 10 years. And you send pictures along with your FOI. And the government should be able to tell you that, oh, we do not have resources, and that is why we did not capture this particular road in this year's budget. Hopefully, in 2022's budget, we will be able to accommodate it. So that's just an example. So as an individual, you can write it, but then you also need to put more information about yourself when you are writing that particular information. That's one.
Please check where the noise is coming from, Leko.
Yes, taking care.
Thank you.
Taking care of.
Okay.
And so the third question about electronic. So I mentioned earlier that the MDAs should have an FOI desk officer. It is stated in the law. Also, in the law, it doesn't say you have to do a letter, what's it called now? It has to be like a letter that has to be delivered to their office. You can send by electronically, yes, provided you have the email address of that particular MDA. So you can do that. That is welcomed. But then we know that most MDAs hardly check their emails. So it's more difficult for you to be able to say, oh, we can't, because once you don't get an acknowledgement, it's as simple as maybe your mail has not been delivered. And the next thing is you just have to keep waiting, keep waiting. But then it is faster once you do, you submit by hand to the MD. At least you know you have an acknowledged copy, which you have in your own record. So you can do an electronic mail. It is welcomed. But then there's no guarantee that that would be responded to, because there's no guarantee of an acknowledgement. So if you can, okay, your second question, does an individual indicate his request for original accordance with the FIR to get a response? No, yeah, so you can put it there, yes, which is fine. Yes, you can state it there to say, according to the FOI 2011, then you can now demand. So I'll share a template and so because in some of the FOI that I've written, I do normally put that there. And also in some cases also, I do normally put the judgments in I think it was the Federal High Court in Ondo State that favored that what's it called now, that federal government are meant to respond, state governments, yeah, that's to do with states now. State government are meant to respond to FOI requests. So if I'm writing a state, for example, especially for those that have not domesticated the FOI, I do normally put that judgment there so that they can easily go to that particular. So I make reference to that so that I can easily Google it on their own to get a response.
We are way behind schedule. We are way behind our time. We've gone beyond our time. But I can see one more hand. I think that will be the last that will be taken today. That's Faith Polinos. Please, Faith, you have the floor. As short as possible, please. Very brief. You have the floor, please. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Seed Africa, for this opportunity. Thank you, Tolu, for such an incisive session. My own question comes on the aspect of disclosure of information. In fact, most of government institutions, most likely and most times don't like disclosing information. And this is where we find it very difficult. So aside from the issue of the law, after this is going to be taken to the law court, it's always like we've been backing, and then we can't bite. So what could be done to improve this? What other ways can be done to, ensure that sanction is being put on defaulting agencies? Thank you very much.
Okay, Faith, I think I'm used to this, your name. I think I've seen you in different meetings. Yeah, so to answer this question, what other ways aside from mitigation? So I mentioned earlier that we have a consortium that ranks MDAs based on compliance to the FOI request. So that has been on for like, I think the last 5 years. And there has been an improvement, whether we like it or not. There has been an improvement when it comes to responding to FOI requests. But then there's still some MDAs, because the first three, so we rank the best first three based on there's some indicators that we watch out for. Yeah, so timeliness, we watch out for level of disclosure. So there are like 9 indicators. So we also watch out for which is I need to mention is the reports, if they've submitted the reports, because that MD is meant to also put that report on their own websites too. So that information is key. So we rate them, or we score them on 9 indicators, and that has really helped because every year we do normally have at least I think especially the first changes, and so it simply means that it's not just NIPC that has been collecting the award every year. No, if NIPC gets it this year, maybe they will fall maybe second next year, and so on, because some are already improving on their own system. So that does not even mean that NIPC is also dropping the ball. No, it simply means that maybe based on the 9 indicators that you're scoring them on, they decide to fail in one of the 9. indicators. So that's why they're getting the low points and they do not fall within the top 3 for that particular year. So that's one way. Another way also to ensure is, so by the time we do this ranking, so we submit that report. This ranking is usually we hold it in the Ministry of Justice conference room. So it's a very big hall. And so the Ministry of Justice is well involved. And for those defaulters, so it is the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice now to sanction them. But you know the system. Everything is just there. And the best way to go about it this time, especially for our FOI ranking, is we should forward this information, just like the way we do the, what's it called now? The OBS. OBS is Open Budget Survey. It is globally recognized. So by the time they see these credible organizations doing the FOI ranking in Nigeria, at least they can now judge or rank the country based on this compliance level. So that will carry more weight. By the time they see that we're going global with this, then they will begin to sit tight, because you rank them out of the 250, maybe 150 of them will not respond to your letter. 11 would do, 100 would do, and you begin to wonder that why is it that these other 150 MDAs are not responding? So those are the ways you can begin to hold government accountable. Litigation is also the last option for me, because if you're trying to build a partnership, litigation as the best way to hold the government accountable. So try those options: trading, creating more awareness, at the same time ranking them, then submitting it to global audience, including the international donors. At least they will see that, oh, this particular MDA, in case they want to support this MDA in terms of on their own mandate or projects, but they will see that, oh, in terms of access to information, these guys are not doing well, so they might decide not to fund them. So that's another way to put it. So those would be those sanctions that can see them improve.
Thank you, Mr. Tolu. I would urge you to take a career to probably look at lecturing, because really you don't seem to run out of responses and all of that. It's been an insightful 2 hours, because this is 11:52. It's been an insightful, very educative and expository, I must say. Thank you for your time. I would like to hand over to Leko now to call it a day and wrap up the session. Leko, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you so much, Tolu, Tokbe. Thank you, Bukola. Thank you, everybody who has been on this call since morning. It's been a wonderful time, I must say. And I want to believe we all had learned something meaningful from this discussion today. Should in case you find this very interesting and you would like others to learn from everything that's been said today, you can simply connect with Seed Africa on our Facebook account, on YouTube. So this video is streamed live right now on Facebook, and it will be available on YouTube. So you can go there, send a link to people to go back and watch and also learn from them. I want to appreciate everybody, but before I let us go, we're supposed to do something, and because of time, I will just take over. My colleague Samuel was supposed to do that, but I'll just do that quickly. This dialogue is aligned with a project that we are working on in South Africa, which we call the African Informers Movement. The idea of this project is to take development back to the community, to raise young people who can serve as community change makers. So the idea is to take a bottom-top approach to development in Africa. So we are doing this from a community to another. So, and this dialogue is a step ahead to try and raise conversations about things that can bring about changes, reform in our communities in Nigeria and Africa at large. So without further ado, I want to say thank you so much for being part of this. It's been an insightful time with you all. We do this every month. And as it is now, I think we'll be doing this every first Saturday of the month, following from today. We'll be doing this every first Saturday of the month. So thank you so much. Please, you can follow us on Facebook at SID Africa, SIID Africa, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or you can simply go to our website, www.sidafrica.org, where you can get more information about us. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Do have a nice day and keep making your community better. Thank you.